As fires cloud Colorado with smoke, we look at whether cutting down more trees is part of the solution. And while it often seems like these fires are burning somewhere in the middle of nowhere, we can give you a clear look at how close each fire is to cities and towns. COVID-19 numbers keep going in the right direction in this state, including a low that we haven't seen in months. President Trump's latest false attack on Colorado's voting system focuses on ballot drop boxes. As the president tries to cast doubt on the election results, we'll show you how the system really works. And we catch up with a woman who is walking up and over Colorado.
They're like, oh, you're a blackpacker. And like, it's not hard to tell who I am.
All that is next. There is a powerlessness when you watch fire after fire burn across Colorado right now while we're stuck in this hot and dry stretch. A long-term part of the solution could be the rebuilding of an entire industry. Here's Steve Steger.
I had a logger tell me, for the past 20 years, you're trying to run me out of this state. Now you're trying to work me to death.
Tim Reeder has a tough job with a long title. Wood Products Utilization Forester for the Colorado State Forest Service. He spent years trying to rebuild an industry of loggers and sawmill operators in Colorado that could help slow down the massive wildfires we're seeing lately.
It's declined over the decades to the point that they're not capable of providing a great deal of impact to some of the situations we see right now.
Reeder says we've gone from 80 sawmills in the state 20 years ago to 30 or so now. He says things like recreation and conservation got in the way.
As we began to recognize those other priorities, simply going in with traditional forest management, wood removals to support sawmills became less of a priority.
Less of a priority until scenes like this.
As we learn more about active forest management in this state and across the West, I think we found that perhaps that type of infrastructure was more valuable and more necessary.
The state is working to incentivize the industry and get it moving again. It'll be tough. One logger told me today the forest product they cut down during this type of mitigation has limited uses, so the value isn't really worth the expense of the work.
It would open up a world of opportunities for landowners who want to do something on their property.
Deputy State Forester Susan Matthews says the industry is one of many tools the state needs to catch up with forest health.
It's hard to imagine having enough resources to devote to the problem to a point where it's done.
So the logger I talked to today said that the low value timber that they get out of this mitigation work would make very good wood fuel. Problem with that is there isn't really much of a market for that here. We have a lot of cheap energy as it is right now, and that stuff is actually really tough to export. It could also be used as pulp for paper, but that process takes a lot of water, which is something we don't have here. The state is helping with some research and development to try to figure out other uses for a lot of the wood, Kyle, that they end up taking out of these forests that have gotten so thick and then lead to the problem that we're seeing.
Yeah, there's got to be a market unless they're going to come in and subsidize it. Plus, you've got the trouble of moving the wood around. I wouldn't know anything about that, but I understand that could be difficult to do as well, moving it around.
Indeed. Getting it from the site up to a sawmill is very, very difficult and very costly.
Yeah. All right. It's a little something for the long-time viewers out there. Steve, thank you. So I'm in the TV box almost every day talking about the various fires burning around our state, and sometimes it's even difficult for me to picture exactly where they are because sometimes, like woods looks like woods, looks like woods. The Grizzly Creek fire is 4 to 5 miles outside Glenwood Springs. It's along No Name Creek up east-northeast of town. Firefighters are trying to hold it there. The Williams Fork fire, 7 miles southwest town of Fraser. The Cameron Peak fire, we always say 60 miles west of Fort Collins. That one's real remote. The closest town is Gould, which is 10 miles northeast up and over the mountain. The fourth largest fire in recorded state history is burning north of Grand Junction right now, but not close to Grand Junction. Closest town to the Pine Gulch fire is DeBeck. It's about 12 miles to the west. None of these towns have been evacuated. That's why you often don't hear their names mentioned alongside the fires, but wanted to give you those different locators for perhaps a bit more context. Colorado's emergency operations center has been active now for 170 straight days. But you walk into that place in Centennial and it's almost empty. There are about 6 people working inside the building. Dozens more are working remotely due to COVID-19 restrictions. They're handling all those wildfires in addition to the state's pandemic response.
The folks that are in there are constantly in communication with at least 70, 100 other folks at any given time. We are constantly on Google Meet calls or Zoom calls, conference calls, so that we can get the information we need, the resources to either the fires or to the public health agencies when they need it.
One crossover between the two simultaneous emergencies lies in evacuations, where they have to figure out how to get people out safely, but not have them then all hang out in one small area while they wait to go home.
Right now, the non-congregate sheltering means that we are looking at people being set up in hotel rooms, or they go to an evacuation point and they stay in their cars, and they get the services individually to their cars, or go to a campground and get the services there. It just depends on the length of the evacuation for each of the fires.
Let's look at the state of the pandemic in Colorado right now. 194 new COVID-19 cases confirmed in the last day, and you'll notice that those numbers have been consistently lower for a few weeks now. 163 Coloradans are hospitalized right now. That number has been below 200 hospitalizations for a few weeks, and it's significantly down from the reported averages of 230 people per day a couple weeks ago. Then you get the positivity rate. That's the percentage of tests coming back positive. You want that low. It's hit its best mark since the pandemic began. Colorado's weekly average for positivity is at 2.98%. We'll be closely watching that number along with hospitalizations as Colorado schools and colleges reopen. Denver City Council is expected to vote tonight on its most radical members' idea to abolish the police department and replace it with a peace force, unarmed officers. Councilwoman Candy Citabaca got this on tonight's agenda without going through the usual process. Imagine that went over well with her colleagues. The idea also drew instant condemnation from Mayor Michael Hancock and from Police Chief Paul Pazin. There's no indication that Councilwoman Citabaca has the support from enough members of City Council to actually advance this to a public vote come September. Our next question comes from a Donald Trump on Twitter, who asked this morning, some states use drop boxes for the collection of universal mail-in ballots. So who is going to collect the ballots? And what might be done to them prior to tabulation? A rigged election? So bad for our country. Only absentee ballots acceptable. That is a great question, Mr. Trump. Thank you for asking so that we can explain how ballot drop boxes are part of Colorado's safe and secure elections that have been run by Republicans and Democrats alike. Here's politics guy Marshall Zellinger with the answer to that gentleman's question.
Once you put your mail-in ballot in a drop box, how does it get from here to the clerk and recorder to be counted? And how can you trust the process?
The key word in the process is chain of custody.
Douglas County Clerk and Recorder Merlin Klotz is a Republican, supports the president, and supports mail-in ballots.
It's a very secure process. It's proven.
Here's where it starts.
Douglas County even made this video from last year, showing how election judges collect ballots from drop boxes. The judges are from 2 opposing parties, perhaps a Republican and a Democrat, or a Republican and unaffiliated. Their first step is checking the drop box's tamper seal.
So if when they arrive at the box, if that seal over the keyhole has been tampered with, they'll see that and report it to the Secretary of State right away.
When they find that the seal has not been tampered with, they remove it, put it on the log sheet, and initial. Then they remove the ballots from the box into a secure travel bag and initial the sheet once again.
They use this zip seal to seal the zippers of the bag. That is recorded on this part of the seal log. So that way you know, even in transport, if anyone touched or tried to break the zip seal on the bag containing the ballots, you would know that. The judges would not initial. They would report that to the Secretary of State immediately.
A different pair of election judges from differing parties check the zip seal at the clerk and recorder's office. They initial the chain of custody sheet if it's still locked, and then the envelopes are removed for the ballots to be counted while being watched by surveillance cameras.
And the whole way through the process, we follow chain of custody. So there's a DNR or dissimilar parties escorting that ballot through the entire process.
And if you don't trust that enough, drop boxes are monitored every minute they're open to accept ballots.
And that videotape is retained for 25 months. So you can go back and audit the videotape.
Here is that travel bag that Douglas County uses. It is big enough for thousands of ballots. Each county can have its own way of transport, but the two different election judges is constant in every county, and that fact that they have to be secured and locked is also the same. In this case, this is where they would zip tie the zippers together and then put it through this hole here to make sure that you cannot open it without knowing. I hope this answers that gentleman's question from Washington, D.C., Kyle.
I think there's a chance, actually, Marshall, that the gentleman in Washington, D.C. was not asking the question in good faith. And now all you're doing is launching a new conspiracy theory that a local TV reporter was seen with a bag full of ballots.
I asked about this from Douglas County if I could borrow this. They made sure they took all the identifying marks away, and knowing that it's just a zip tie that closes this, you can look now. There's nothing in it. There's no zip tie. When it gets filled at the next election, I have nothing to do with this. It's a clean break.
Every time I see you wrestling with that thing, it reminds me of like the last time I tried to set up a camping tent. You know, it's just a canvas in every direction. All right, thank you, Marshall. Colorado is home to the firefighting supertanker, but it rarely spends the peak of fire season here. She's taking on the Colorado Trail.
At any point on the trail, I recognize that I'm the only person that looks like me.
Hopes others will follow her lead into Colorado's outdoors. Next. Every time wildfires dot the map and fill our skies with smoke, Coloradans always ask us here at Next, where's the supertanker? Aren't we using the supertanker? The giant firefighting plane is based here, Colorado Springs, but it's usually off fighting fires elsewhere. It's in Southern California right now, where it's been for about 2 weeks. Help me, please. Somebody help me back at the station. Thank you so much. Incident commanders have to request air support for wildfires, and then usually at that point, emergency managers, somebody like with the National Forest or a state team, assigns which aircraft go where, including the supertanker. Aircraft are usually requested by type. So if somebody asks for a biggin, that's actually not what they say. They call them a VLAT, very large air tanker. Then when they call for that, the supertanker could be in the mix. It can drop 19,000 gallons of water or fire retardant in a single trip.
Widespread heavy smoke and ozone today. An air quality alert issued again. You look at the air over the Continental Divide. Blah! That air quality alert will cover much of the Front Range and Eastern Plains. And we broke a record today, 98 degrees in Denver. The average high is 87, the old record 97. And we're headed right back to this number tomorrow. And of course, the moisture that's coming in on the radar, well, we're seeing wind and lightning out of those storms and not the rain that we need. But the chance for that, well, may be changing for us on Wednesday and Thursday. So again, poor air for the next couple of days and hot temps back in the 90s. After a mild overnight with a bit of smoke and haze during the sleeping period, we'll be back close to 100 tomorrow. Best chance of rain from storms will be Wednesday into Thursday with this a little bit of a cooling trend heading into next weekend.
The Colorado Trail, a nearly 500-mile hike across our state.
I'm definitely going to take my time because there's a lot of elevation and climbing about to happen.
It's ridiculously tough. That's why she's doing it. Next. Colorado Trail runs from Waterton Canyon, southwest of Chatfield, down clear across our state to Durango. You can hike it, which is not to say that I could hike it or that most people could hike it. It is nearly 500 miles. It's over a ton of mountain passes. So, I mean, you have to have some real ability and a real reason to hike the Colorado Trail. Patricia Cameron has a reason.
I'm really slow. Like, that's the best way I can describe that. And I'm not doing it with the lightest gear. I'm not doing it the fastest, but I'm still out here and I'm still a part of it. I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Backpackers. It aims to address the economic issues with getting outdoors. And so people who are experiencing backpacking know that the upfront cost of this type of activity can be pretty tough. I know it was for me. I talked about the trip I was going to do before I launched. And so I was on the trek and a couple other places. So sometimes people are on the trail and they're like, oh, you're a blackpacker. And like, it's not hard to tell who I am. It can be overwhelming. And I know that I don't escape that feeling. Like at any point on the trail, I recognize that I'm the only person that looks like me. And I get into the towns and I realize I'm the only person that looks like me. And that's gonna be there, I'm a Black woman in Colorado. And I've been here for 26 years, so that's not something I am unfamiliar with. So I'm out here representing Blackpackers, and I want people to know that there's a community of people that look like them, that they can join to get outdoors. I think what I'm most shocked about is my capacity to cope with anxiety and fear with my inexperience in the outdoors. So I have not done a lot of solo overnights, and being out in the wilderness by myself and knowing I'm probably miles away from the next hiker is scary, but super empowering when I wake up the next morning and realize that was me, I did that. So what I wanted to do was I thought about it last year, and I planned to hike the Colorado Trail to kind of bring attention to diversity and economic disparities in outdoor recreation and the people who participate in it. And also, trek across Colorado, that's a pretty good reason just to walk across the state.
At this moment, Patricia Cameron's making her way through the San Juan Mountains, somewhere between Lake City and Silverton. I know her from Twitter, where she's been documenting her preparations for the hike and then the hike itself. She's a great follow. If you're on Twitter, she's CO Blackpacker, and she'll be writing about her experiences for Backpacker Magazine. Hey, I have a reason to start your week feeling great, I promise. And we'll also do your feedback, which tends to have the opposite effect on me. Next. Heard again from the folks at Newborns in Need today with an update. You all donated $28,500 to support their work. They make sure that the low-income families leaving Denver Health with a newborn have all the essentials they need, like a safe car seat, a crib, a stroller, whatever the family needs. $28,000 is going to go a long way for that nonprofit work, so thank you so much. I'm cooking up our next word of thanks micro-giving project for Wednesday, $5 at a time. You have raised $375,000 for Colorado's nonprofits since June. Iris says, I wish it was Wednesday so we could give thanks. Best day of the week. I look forward to every single week as well. Lila says, kind of sad that you need to do a story to show people how safe and secure mail-in ballots are. Well, Lila, there's nothing wrong with people wanting to see the process and wanting to know the process. We're happy to do that. What's sad is that the president is intentionally spreading misinformation to sow doubt in the election results, when the fact is Colorado's mail-in ballot system was built by Republicans and Democrats alike, and they should take great pride in how well it works. Ken says, good story on the timber possibilities. One problem is that modern logging equipment can't handle the steep and rough terrain that they could do with a team of horses. Well, that's interesting. And Dan says, I thought you got fired. Life is full of surprises, Dan. I'll see you next time.